Star Wars, in my opinion, is going too far. We had the original trilogy, we had the prequels, and we currently have the sequel trilogy. It's kind of amazing how Star Wars hasn't lost its flame at all in the last few decades. Before any new Star Wars content, we had toys and video games and TV shows, so it's odd how popular Star Wars has gotten. The popularity of Star Wars definitely plays a role in why we should just stop it with Star Wars. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Star Wars, okay? I'm not a huge Star Wars cuck, but when I was younger, I had Star Wars Lego sets and I watched the TV shows and episodes. I dressed up as Obi-Wan and Darth Vader and Luke for Halloween for 3 different years, so I like to think that I have a pretty good unbiased idea on Star Wars, which should make my opinions and statements more true than a biased Star Wars mega fan. So before I dive into why Star Wars should just stop and or have stopped a long while ago, I have to dive into the history of Star Wars. First of all, Star Wars was just one movie in the 70s. It was originally called Star Wars, but the name was eventually changed to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, so they could make a franchise from this one movie. They made Episode 5 and Episode 6, which concluded the original trilogy, and all these movies are fairly decent, no doubt about it. Then George Lucas got really ambitious with his vision, and made the prequel movies, which told a completely different story and had a completely different vibe. Unlike the original trilogy, which focused on Luke and Obi-Wan and Vader, and Han Solo and Chewbacca going on their odyssey against the dark side, the prequels were set on completely different planets and areas, and focused on the Jedi aspect a lot more than the original trilogy, and introduced Jedi academies, and it focused on young Obi-Wan and Anakin before Anakin became Darth Vader. After a long Star Wars movie hiatus, we had The Force Awakens, Episode 7, which is something that many fans waited and dreamed of. Okay, now I'm getting to my point about Star Wars. If I am being honest, The Force Awakens is actually a pretty decent movie. It was really refreshing to see Star Wars come back in a new way that was somehow the same way. Instead of straying away and building up tons of lore, The Force Awakens was trying to refresh original Star Wars fans and tried to bring back the light of the original trilogy and its concepts. Desert planets, droids, a new villain, and the Millennium Falcon, and the best of all, the stretch-eating star the stars do when you go into hyperspace. The Force Awakens had some controversy surrounding it, mostly about Rey's character, but there are a lot of reasons for fans to like this movie. And next we have The Last Jedi. I went to see this movie in theaters with some friends of mine, and overall I had a blast watching it. I definitely wouldn't have as much fun watching it if my friends weren't with me, but I thought that the movie was pretty aight. Definitely not as good as The Force Awakens. It was a bit boring. When I got home, I saw the reviews for the movie, and holy shit, there was literally a Phantom War. The criticism for this movie is so blind and furious that the points people make don't have any meaning anymore. There are some fans who bring up decent points on why this movie is bad, and I agree with some things, but there are also those types of fans who just blurt out stuff, and I can't decipher anything they're saying. Okay, now that was a long intro, but I'm getting into the point now. The thing is, Star Wars doesn't have the same flame it used to have, and I feel like Star Wars should never have had this entire sequel trilogy, because Star Wars isn't refreshing anymore. I feel burnt out now from watching the trailer. Let me compare the Force Awakens trailer with the Rise of Skywalker trailer, and let me tell you why the Force Awakens was the right direction, and what it did right. We start out with a desert planet, a stormtrooper, a droid, and more stormtroopers, a hovercraft, and a dark Sith-looking dude with a red lightsaber, and most importantly, the Millennium Falcon. We are all familiar with these Star Wars concepts, so instead of Star Wars showing us what the new movie is about, they just showed us what we cared about, Star Wars being back. Chances are when you first saw this teaser, you weren't really focusing on what the movie was going to be, but more on the fact that Star Wars is finally back. The Last Jedi trailer decided not to focus on that and more on the story and Rey, because they already got the fan service out of the way, and it felt like nothing mattered other than what Rey does in the movie. And Episode 9 looks the same way. It just seems to be focusing on Rey again. Now there's a controversy about Rey being a Mary Sue, being too strong, which yeah, I agree with, but in my opinion isn't really that big a deal. Yeah, it bugs me sometimes, but it's just a movie. But the thing that does irk me is the fact that the movies never focus on other characters and mostly focus on her. The movies have never let Finn shine, or Poe, and when they do, it's very short. Finn and Poe actually have great, interesting character potential, because Finn is an escaped stormtrooper who wants to do good. Poe is a pilot that escaped with Finn, and he's part of the Resistance. He's cocky and somewhat arrogant, What does Rey have interesting about her? Hell, even Kylo Ren has a more interesting character, Rey's stupid ass. The original trilogy focused on everyone. Leia, Luke, R2-D2, and C-3PO, Han Solo, and Chewbacca, and Obi-Wan, and even Darth Vader. Same with the prequels. They focused on Anakin and Obi-Wan. The sequel trilogy has Rey's the main focus, and I think that's what really bogged down The Last Jedi. The reason the movie was so long and boring, because it was focused too much on Rey and not much else. Also, for some reason, she's too overpowered. Now, I know I said I didn't really mind her being Mary Sue, but I have to mention it because it bogged down The Last Jedi as well. She's able to get herself out of any situation, no matter what it is. She's the one who saves everyone at the end of the movie, and Finn and Rose go on that trip to find the Master Codebreaker, and it's all useless in the end because the Codebreaker betrays them, and they didn't even achieve their mission. Poe and Finn and Rose didn't accomplish anything. What did Rey get to accomplish? She was able to fly the Millennium Falcon and save everyone. She was able to save everyone from the cave by force lifting the rocks. She was able to defeat an entire group of Snoke's bodyguards better than Kylo Ren, who literally trained his entire life to be a Jedi Master Sith Lord. Another rant is that The Last Jedi ruins the character of Luke, which is something I agree with. Luke in this movie does nothing. He's really sad and dull and bland, and he doesn't resemble his original trilogy version at all. Because his original trilogy version was a young man with an arc. He was a Jedi Master, but he had flaws, you know? He had a beginning and middle and end to his legacy and story. And they do him terrible in this movie because he's so non-prominent. He's old and sad and boring. He doesn't seem the same at all. I could go on and on with Luke Skywalker in this movie, but I feel like this video is going to be really lifeless and long if I do, so I won't. So my conclusion, the Star Wars sequel trilogy isn't bad. It's just lost its flame. And I'd rather have Episode 9 not exist than have a series with no flame anymore. Hopefully whatever Star Wars content they have planned after Episode 9 actually satisfies everyone. And as unlikely as that is, it's always good to hope.